What happens when a calm, measured remark about preserving stability suddenly explodes into a regional firestorm, with Singapore's Prime Minister Lawrence Wong accused of taking sides in century-old wounds that never fully healed? In the high-stakes world of East Asian diplomacy, where Japan's wartime past and China's rising power collide, Wong's seemingly innocuous comments during a high-profile interview unleashed a torrent of fury online. It was a moment that exposed the fragile balance small nations must strike between giants like China and Japan. And it raises a bigger question. In an era of viral outrage and nationalist fervor, can leaders speak plainly about peace without getting burned? In this video, we break down what Lawrence Wong said and the wave of backlash that erupted afterward. Stay with us until the end, where we reveal our take on whether the criticism he faced was truly deserved. Let's set the stage. It's November 2025, and tensions in East Asia are as taut as a bowstring. Japan and China, two economic powerhouses with a shared past that's anything but peaceful, are locked in a fresh dispute over Taiwan, a self-governing island that Beijing claims as its own territory. On November 7th, Japan's newly appointed Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi addressed Parliament in Tokyo. She didn't mince words. If China were to launch military action against Taiwan, she declared, it would pose an existential threat to Japan's very survival. It's a bold stance, one that echoed Japan's growing military ambitions and its strategic worries about Beijing's assertiveness in the region. China, predictably, erupted in fury. Beijing labelled it as meddling in its internal affairs, a phrase that's become a red line in diplomatic lexicon. What followed is a cascade of retaliation, stern travel warnings for Japanese citizens heading to China, whispers of trade restrictions on key exports, and a show of force with military drills. The airwaves buzz with accusations, and the risk of escalation hangs heavy. And then there is Singapore, a tiny island nation that's long mastered the art of threading the needle in big power rivalries. With a population of just over 5 million and no natural resources to speak of, Singapore has built its success on being a reliable hub, hosting global forums, balancing trade with everyone from the US to China, and quietly pursuing its own security interests. Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, who took office in May 2025, embodies this pragmatic approach and is known for his steady hand and focus on resilience amid global uncertainties. He's not one for grandstanding. His style is measured and forward-looking. On November 19th, Wong found himself at the Bloomberg New Economy Forum in Singapore, a glitzy gathering of business leaders and policymakers from around the world. The event, held at Singapore's Marina Bay Sands, was meant to chart paths to overcoming economic challenges, but geopolitics inevitably crept in. A journalist presses Wong on the Japan-China spat. His response? It's a call for calm in a stormy sea. Stability in Asia, he said, benefits everyone, from bustling trade routes to everyday folks hoping for a predictable future. He urged both nations to de-escalate, to dial back the rhetoric and the posturing. Then he touched on something deeper, the lingering shadow of World War II history between Japan and China. It's this part that will soon spark the blaze.
And I wonder, you've just seen this spat going on between Japan and China over Taiwan. How precarious does Asia feel at the moment?
Now, on Japan and China, we all want stability in Asia. I mean, that's, of course, something it's in everyone's interest. So we certainly hope that both countries will find ways to de-escalate the current issue. The China-Japan relationship is important. Economically, it's important. China is Japan's largest trading partner. But it's a complex relationship, partly because of the US-China strategic competition. So everything that China and Japan has is seen through that larger prism. They also have disputes in the Senkaku Islands. And of course, it's also because of the overhang of the history of the Second World War, which still remains between the two countries. We hope the two countries will find ways to resolve these very complex issues and move forward. Southeast Asia has done that with Japan, as far as the history is concerned. It has taken some time, But with the passage of time, with the passing of generations, the feelings are not the same. And we have put the history aside and we're moving forward. And it's quite striking that survey after survey shows that Japan is the #1 trusted great power in Southeast Asia. And so Singapore and all the Southeast Asian countries support Japan playing a bigger role in our region, including on the security front, because we think that provides for some stability in the region.
To understand why Wong's words landed like a match on dry tinder, we need to rewind the clock to the Second Sino-Japanese War between 1937 to 1945, the bloodiest chapter in Asia's modern history. It began with Japan's seizure of Manchuria in 1931 and exploded into full-scale invasion after the Marco Polo bridge clash on the 7th of July, 1937. Japanese forces rapidly overran eastern China. The Battle of Shanghai left hundreds of thousands dead, and the fall of Nanjing in December 1937 was followed by 6 weeks of systematic slaughter and looting, known ever since as the Nanjing Massacre, claiming an estimated 200,000 to 300,000 lives. Over the next 8 years, Japan occupied China's coastal heartland. By 1945, China had suffered up to 20 million deaths, more than any other country in the war. These events remain central to Chinese national memory, taught in every school and invoked whenever tensions with Japan flare. For many Chinese citizens, Japan's wartime aggression is not ancient history. It is an open wound. Even till today, many feel Japan never fully atoned. Apologies came, but they were often qualified, and economic ties haven't erased the bitterness. So when Wong spoke of the lingering overhang of history and seemed to suggest that, like Southeast Asia, China could eventually move past it, many heard an outsider telling them to get over atrocities that, in their eyes, have never been adequately acknowledged or atoned for. In that context, even a measured call for reconciliation felt like salt in an open wound. But Wong's full point at the forum was more nuanced. He highlighted surveys showing Japan as the most trusted major power in Southeast Asia, a fact backed by the ICS Yusof Ishak Institute's annual State of Southeast Asia report. The latest edition from April 2025 confirmed it. Japan tops the list for reliability, edging out even the US. Why? Because post-war, Japan poured resources into the region, aid, infrastructure, technology transfers, without the colonial baggage. Southeast Asian nations, scarred by Japan's occupation during the war, have largely moved on, forging economic partnerships that fuel growth. Wong argued this trust supports Japan taking a larger security role, stabilizing the region amid rising uncertainties. It's a pragmatic view from Singapore, which sees a balanced Asia as key to its survival. But nuance often evaporates online. Within days, the backlash brewed in Hong Kong, then spilled into mainland China. It started small. Outlets like AM 730 and ON.cc ran headlines twisting Wong's words into a supposed call for China to abandon its historical prejudices. Larger platforms piled on. HK01, a site founded in 2016 by a staunch Beijing supporter, churned out 5 pieces within a week. Mostly commentaries decrying Singapore's obvious bias toward Japan. From there, it went viral. Chinese social media lit up with videos and posts from self-proclaimed pundits, many chasing clicks in a content economy where outrage pays. They recast Wong's plea for de-escalation as outright interference, accusing Singapore of cozying up to Japan, and by extension, the US. Netizens fumed over what they saw as Singapore presuming to speak for its neighbours, especially after Wong cited those trust surveys. This wasn't organic fury alone. Signs pointed to orchestration. The coordinated headlines, the sudden swarm of similar videos, it smacked of manufactured momentum, perhaps amplified by nationalist influences spotting a safe target. China's internet is a tightly controlled space, yet these attacks on Singapore weren't censored. That green light might have encouraged creators to amp up the vitriol, knowing it wouldn't get yanked. Broader currents fed the fire too. Surging anti-Japan sentiment, stoked by state media reports on historical grievances and current spats. With nationalism on the rise, Singapore, a prosperous ethnic Chinese majority nation that treads carefully with Beijing, made an easy scapegoat. Singapore has faced similar storms before. The most notable was the 2016 Terex incident. That November, 9 Singaporean Terex infantry carrier vehicles, returning from routine military training in Taiwan, were seized by Hong Kong customs during a commercial transit stop. Singapore has trained on Taiwan since the 1970s due to limited space at home, an arrangement it maintains quietly while adhering to the One China policy. The vehicles, worth millions, remained impounded for over 2 months. Singapore insisted they were sovereign property covered by diplomatic immunity. Pro-China voices saw the Taiwan link as a breach of the One China principle. Chinese media spun it as a violation of the One China principle, while online campaigns, fueled by disinformation, painted Singapore as duplicitous. The issue was resolved only after high-level exchanges, with the vehicles returned in January 2017. The episode underscored how quickly security differences can spark public outrage in China. More recently, in July 2025, Singapore publicly disclosed that a highly sophisticated cyber espionage group known as UNC 3886, a China Nexus actor active since 2021, had targeted its critical infrastructure, including energy, transport, and government networks, and posed a serious espionage risk. While Singapore stopped short of directly naming China as the sponsor, the China Nexus attribution was clear enough. Beijing swiftly rejected any involvement, calling the claims groundless. The unusually transparent disclosure represented a shift in Singapore's approach, signaling confidence in its defensive capabilities. Coming after incidents like the 2016 Terex seizure, it added another layer to the occasional friction in Singapore-China ties whenever the city-state firmly asserts its security independence. By late November 2025, as the online storm raged, one striking detail stood out. The backlash never crossed into the official sphere. Major state-affiliated outlets such as Global Times and China Daily, normally quick to echo Beijing's displeasure, remained silent. There were no fiery editorials, no quotes from prominent scholars, no coordinated media campaign. In China's tightly managed information environment, this restraint spoke volumes. The criticism was allowed to flourish on social platforms and smaller pro-Beijing sites, yet it was carefully contained within the digital space. This pattern suggested a deliberate choice: permit public venting and nationalist expression while shielding the broader Singapore-China relationship from real damage. Past incidents had followed a similar script: sharp online reactions, but no lasting diplomatic fallout. Once again, the uproar served as a release valve rather than a rupture, leaving official ties intact even as keyboards burned. So, did Lawrence Wong's comments warrant this backlash? Let's unpack that objectively. On one hand, diplomacy is a contact sport. Words matter, and Wong knew the terrain. Referencing World War II history in a public forum, even constructively, risks misinterpretation in a region where narratives are fiercely guarded. His parallel to Southeast Asia's reconciliation, while accurate, could come off as lecturing to those still grappling with trauma. China, after all, bore the war's brunt, and calls to move on can feel like erasure. In a polarized online echo chamber where algorithms reward extremes, even a mild suggestion amplifies into betrayal. On the other hand, and this is where balance tips, the outrage seemed outsized. Wong wasn't endorsing Japan's stance or bashing China. He was advocating de-escalation, a universal good that aligns with Singapore's core interest in a stable Asia. His point on the trust in Japan? Grounded in data from neutral surveys reflecting real regional dynamics. The backlash he received ignored Singapore's consistent One China adherence, its massive trade with Beijing and shared cultural roots. If anything, this episode highlighted how domestic pressures in China, from economic slowdowns to youth unemployment, can channel into external scapegoating. Wong's words didn't provoke war. They invited dialogue. The real risk? If such overreactions persist, they erode trust, pushing nations like Singapore toward firmer US alignments, a lose-lose for regional peace. As tensions over great power rivalry grow, small, honest voices like Lawrence Wong's become even more vital. They remind everyone of the shared interest in peace. But in an era of viral outrage, calling for de-escalation takes courage. Wong's remarks were not a mistake. They were a glimpse of what principled diplomacy looks like in a powder keg region. Peace isn't guaranteed, it has to be chosen, one careful sentence at a time. In fact, Lawrence Wong found himself weighing every word when the Financial Times pressed him with difficult questions. What exactly was he challenged on? And how did he navigate it? The full story awaits you in this video.